I'm Barb Schneider.
And I'm
Kevin Friel. We'll tell you a little bit about ourselves and how this ever came to be. And then we're going to talk a lot about Osprey, and we'll be glad to answer questions. Please, while we're talking today, since we're here and you're all familiar with us and this project for the most part, feel free to raise a hand and ask a question if there's something you want us to stop and answer, because we will do that. This is being taped for FCTV. They would like to be able to show this. They can do some editing, so please don't be timid when you ask a question. If it's not audible, he'll edit it so it's out, and don't worry about it, but we want you to feel comfortable doing that, okay? You want to start?
Sure. So the Osprey Project started for me as a photography project. And my goal was to photograph every nest and osprey in the town of Falmouth. So I went around one January and noticed about 24 nests that were on utility poles. Then I went around in February and they were all gone. And I wondered where they all went. There were no deterrents placed, there was nothing. These nests just vanished. So the following spring, we had a lot of problems with these osprey coming back and building on those spots again. We had multiple fires. I think
10.
We know of at least 9 or 10.
Yeah.
Multiple fatality of birds. And
power outages.
Power outages, mainly focusing on Thomas Landers Road and Falmouth Heights. The pair that was around the Christmas tree shop was a problem. They were going from pole to pole to pole. And the problem is, Eversource took these nests down, and some of these nests had been there for a decade. So all of the power lines kind of had burned kind of tunnels through all these nests. So they really weren't in that big of a danger of blowing up or lighting on fire. Once they removed them, all bets were off. Now they're putting sticks back on live wires. So that caused a huge problem that season. And we wanted to put an end to that because Eversource was reluctant to find alternative nesting spots. I did talk them into one location behind Cappy's. I don't know if everybody is familiar with that one, but there are deterrents now in the Cappy's parking lot. Out behind Cappy's, there's a platform kind of tucked in between some maple trees. They moved right to that, and then from that sprung the Osprey Project.
And I know you're hearing the word deterrent. We're going to talk a lot about deterrents because it is one of the prongs of this project that is so imperative. In fact, we couldn't do the project without that word deterrent. So we'll show you photos of what that means. Kevin is an emotional guy. I'm emotional, but I'm a teacher, so I had a little more ability to reel it in. Kevin wrote about his dismay of these fires and the results, especially of birds that were killed in these fires. And I was reading online, and this is one of the times that we think that social media really does do a good job. It connected, it does. It connected Kevin and me, and also one other person who's with the Conservation Commission. And we all saw the problem. We saw it with different potential solutions, and we started to meet on a weekly basis. It was during the pandemic, and we met outside at the Black Dog Cafe at a table, even though it wasn't open. And didn't matter what the weather was, and we were determined to come up, have marching orders every week, and come up with a path forward. And so we're going to talk a little bit today about that birth of that, but I wanted you to all hear how Kevin and I ever met each other. We are definitely two different people, but we have an incredibly tight bond around this project, and then because of the project, it's a connectivity that will be forever. So I just wanted you to hear that part because I think we're all about connectivity in the town of Falmouth and how we can find others even though we may not agree on a lot of things, we can find a way to agree on some things and make that our focus, and that's what we've done. So,
All right.
Well, go
So
ahead.
on to the pictures.
yep.
So I will mention, not to blow my own horn or anything, but all these photographs that you're about to see were taken by me or Barbara with her cell phone. Some of them you'll know the difference, I think.
I don't love you anymore. Okay, so we're gonna get this to work. Yeah.
Could we dim the lights so we could see the screen better?
You can
looks
turn
like-
off. I want to turn off one part of them back there, Gary. Can you flip a couple? And first, I'm going to try and figure out how to get this.
Gary looks like he may be dimming lights.
You want to make things tough on the cameraman, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah, I photographed a basketball game the other day. It's miserable. It's just in a dark room.
All right.
Oh, is that so dark for you now?
I'll adjust, don't worry.
All right.
Okay. So, front row, you're exempt from this question. Second row, you're not. Somebody give me one thing you know about ospreys. Loudly. Yes, ma'am.
I know they hold their fish aerodynamically. So
They do.
lighter than easily.
We will explain that in a couple of minutes. It's one of my favorite words in the English language is coming up to describe them.
All right. Somebody else? Yes.
I like the fact that they dive underwater to get their
Yep.
prey.
Yep. Okay. Anyone else?
They eat fish.
They
They sure do.
And they are known as fish hawks. That's exactly right. Yes,
I
ma'am.
think they have a special way to use their wings that other birds don't.
They do. They have a much more flexible elbow, we'll call it.
Yep.
And if you've noticed the birds flying, they look like a big M or a W if they're flying away from you.
All right.
So speaking of them flying, this is a map of the osprey's range. Now the osprey exists on all places of the earth where trees and water exist together, which means everywhere except Antarctica. So we have a couple of populations of osprey in our hemisphere, basically. Basically, North America is split right in half. Birds to the east of the Mississippi River end up migrating to South America. Birds to the west end up in Central America. These birds do not go here, and these birds do not go here. The purple areas are year-round populations of birds. There's actually another one right up in here in California that's year-round, but that's not a very big population.
It's 12 osprey that they've counted that are staying year-round, and they don't know why.
And I'm sure it's because of the otters. They like the otters, I bet.
And I just came from Florida where our birds do not stop in Florida. They do not intervene. And I think that a lot of that is because those birds down there have already started their mating and nesting season. And by the time our birds are flying through, they would be interfering with the young and what's going on down there. So it's very interesting that they'll actually skip over. Okay.
Sure.
Yes.
How do you know? I mean, are they tagged or something?
Well, there have been other people that have studied them and have tagged them, and they've noticed that birds from Oregon end up in Panama, birds from Maine and Massachusetts generally end up in the Amazon somewhere. Yes.
How do the birds that come from, let's say, Northeast know not to stop in Florida?
That's a good question.
How do they know where they're
So
going anyway?
my guess is that as they're flying south, the food source is maybe a little bit more limited. So there's probably territorial battles with the native osprey. So I think that after a couple of years, they know, let's not stop in the Keys. Yeah.
You want to talk about the Migratory Bird Act?
So the Migratory Bird Treaty Act of 1918 basically protects these birds from harassment and damage of their nests while they're active. And an active nest is considered a nest with eggs or chicks that can't fly. So before there are eggs and after the chicks can fly, those nests can be removed. And Eversource does take advantage of those time frames.
Who can tell us what was going on in 1918 that there was grave concern about birds in general? Yes. Well, not,
Passenger pigeon, last one died right around then.
nope.
That's also true.
one.
Those
That's
are both
true.
true
Those
stories.
they are, but
However,
Nope.
feathered caps.
Hats. Fashion. Fashion was wiping out incredible species of birds. That's what caused this to step up. And you can look back and see that.
The
very
punt gun
easily.
didn't help.
What?
The punt gun, there's a reason that's not legal anymore. But anyway,
Okay.
having some troubles.
There we go.
All right, so the osprey, as we've mentioned, is a fish-eating fish, or a fish-eating bird. If we look at this display of the talons here, we notice that it's a big square. Most birds, well, most other raptors, excluding owls, have 3 in the front and 1 in the back as far as their talons go. The osprey also has 3 in front, 1 in the back. However, it's got what they call zygodactyl feet, which means that it can actually spin a digit around and have a 2-and-2 configuration, which makes it much, much, much better at catching fish and then carrying fish. If you notice this picture here, it's in a 2-and-2 formation and it just snaps down and collapses on this fish.
Remember that you're looking at that eye. I want you to remember that eye color, okay?
Sure. Is it on? Oh, it is on. Now I'm dual mic'd, huh? Nice. So if we notice this fish position here, it has the tail extending back towards the bird's tail, and it's got its feet 2-and-2, carrying it like a snow cone, basically. Here's a better example of it. And if we notice this bird, it's got kind of a black eye stripe. All of the osprey are going to have that. Eagles and hawks don't have the same look to them. If we were to be looking at a red-tailed hawk here, they have a dark leading edge to their wings. The osprey are very, very easy to distinguish when they're flying because of their underwing patterns.
Everybody take note of this area of that bird. Now I'm going to go back to the one before it. Notice that one? See the
So
difference?
what she's wanting you to look at is this area right here. We call that a necklace. Young birds and female birds tend to have predominant necklaces. As males grow up, they lose that and it becomes a stark white front like the one we see here.
Again, notice the eye color.
Here's another great example of the zygodactyl feet. You can see on this one here, he's got 2 on this side, 2 on the other side. If you look in the shadow here, you can see his beak. He was screaming. So when these osprey catch a fish, they get soaking wet. So the first thing they do, whether they catch a fish or don't catch a fish, the first thing they do is they'll fly, I don't know, 15, 20 feet up in the air and then shake themselves off like a dog. And if you can get the sun on the other side of them, you can get an image like this.
How long did it take you to get that?
I sat on a spot on a hill every day.
48 years.
Well, yeah. So that last picture was taken at the Coonamessett River Restoration before it was restored. It was from the pile of rocks where the overlook is now. And I sat there every day for 2.5 hours a day, about 2 weeks to get that picture. So yeah, a lot goes into the wildlife photography side of this. But that's not what we're here about. We're here to talk about the Cape Cod snow cone this guy's making. So the males and the young, this one appears to be a young bird. We'll talk about exactly why later, but if you notice the eye color, it's a little bit orange, it's not yellow. And also, if we look at the feathers, the tips of these feathers are white. We'll talk about that here in a
They
minute,
almost
too.
look like scales, right? Remember that too.
And here's another Cape Cod snow cone flying along. This bird here, very interesting. This one appears to have missed a molt, which means that it was supposed to basically blow through its feathers, kind of like your dog sheds its skin sheds its fur every year. The osprey will do that with their feathers. This one looks like it missed a molt. All these feathers in here are kind of bleached out by the sun. This bird does look normal now, and we can tell it's an adult by the color of the eyes.
I want you all to just keep that in your mind. I'm going to not tell you about that right now, but remember you saw that. You will see it again. There it is.
So these osprey, as we can see from this nest, it is mainly sticks. They do the sticks around the perimeter of the nest. The inside of the nest, they pick up all sorts of stuff. So let's say you've got the rack line in a salt marsh, really collects the reeds of the grasses. They'll come in and scoop those up and bring them up to their nest. And in that, there's a lot of times there's trash. There's beer bottles, there's cans, there's Red Sox hats, there's all sorts of stuff. And these guys found a fishing pole.
And they placed it perfectly. And I'm going to add one story to that. One of the things that Kevin and I ended up doing in the first year of this project was getting emergency calls that birds were building in inappropriate places, and could we go over, because people weren't home and they were being told about it by neighbors, could we go over and do something to stop it? And one of the calls we got was an osprey building on a fish cleaning platform on a dock. And we took a big garbage bag, and we had gloves, and we went over, and the job was to scoop that nest off of the platform and get it into the bag and get it away and find something to put on that platform so they couldn't come back and build there. And I was holding the bag, I believe, and Kevin was doing the scooping, and all of a sudden I heard a thud and felt a thud and looked down at my feet, and there was a rabbit's head. But what they do is that they will use animals that they've picked up, not necessarily that they've killed or eaten, but they use dead birds and animals to line and add into their nest.
Yes. So these nests, as far as diameter, you're looking at anywhere between 3 and 6 feet. They're fairly large. As far as height and weight, that's variable. They generally don't last very long. They get tall and they get blown over during a winter storm, and then the birds rebuild.
We're going to talk a little more about nest size.
Yeah.
And
So
height.
next time you're on 25, I'm not saying that you should look away from the road when you're driving, but if you look out to the right of 25 at mile marker 7, you'll see an osprey nest that is, no lie, 8 to 10 feet above the platform. It looks like Abe Lincoln's hat. It's insane. And that one's about 15 years old.
Okay. So you notice now you're starting to know, oh, I know that one on the left is a male, right? And oh, those two over there might be either juveniles or females on the right.
And you would be incorrect.
That's right.
So the necklace that we're talking about is not a very strong field mark. A lot of ornithologists don't even consider that because it's such a variable thing. What does matter is the size of the bird. Female osprey are about 20% larger than male osprey. And that has to do with how they mate, basically.
What are you noticing in this one? Who can raise a hand and give us something you see right away that tells you about this bird?
We've mentioned it. Eye color, yes.
And what about feathers?
See the white tips on the feathers?
Scale-like, right?
Kind of frayed edges rather than... These juvenile feathers don't zip together at the ends. They're much fluffier. And what that does is it allows the bird to grab more air when it flaps its wings. One of the problems with that is that they're not very aerodynamic and they're clumsy. So once they molt these first feathers, now they've got actual flight feathers. So it's basically the difference between flying a 747 and then jumping into an F-15.
Add this into the collection of decorations,
Yeah.
part of a hat.
And this bird is fairly close to fledging. Now this image here shows not only a trash bag, but a female obvious adult. See how the feathers zip together at the edges? They're not frayed at all. They're very, very smooth. Makes it much, much more aerodynamic. The main thing here is the eye color. See how deep red that eye is now? That's a fairly young osprey. They're born with, have you ever opened a blood orange? It's about that color.
It is.
It's just a beautiful, beautiful color red. And here's a guy building a stick. Or this actually is a juvenile bird carrying a stick. Mm-hmm. So they do a couple of, I call them nest building periods. There'll be one in the spring where all the males come back. And by the way, we forgot to mention when they'll be back, on about St. Patrick's Day. And the males will come back generally first, but sometimes not. I think the last couple of years, the males and females have both come back within 2 or 3 days of each other, which is remarkable because we also forgot to mention that when they migrate, the male and the female go to different places. So the male may go to French Guiana and the female may go to Brazil. And then they come back and they meet within 2 or 3 days of each other. It's wild. I don't understand how it happens. But then they also do a nest building in the fall. Once the females take off, which they do take off before the males, once they leave, the males start bringing sticks again. And then the juveniles catch on and they start flying sticks. We've actually seen a complete nest get built by a juvenile about 1.5 blocks from our nest on Clinton Ave in the fall. Once he started flying, he just started dropping sticks on a telephone pole, and now we've got a problem.
How long does it take them to build a nest?
Well, we had, what was it? I think we moved a nest, I want to say
It's normally
3 to
7
5
to 10
days.
days. is
3
what
to 5, it would be a quick one, and then they'll continue adding. But it would be solid enough and warm enough underneath to support at 7 to 10 days, I would imagine. Doesn't take long.
Is that the one that the juvenile then comes back to? Because
Well, that's a question that we don't really know the answer to.
that and the spruce tree next to my house.
Yeah.
Where they built in West Falmouth, and they, at the end of the season, they were building, and then the next year.
We know parents normally dominate.
428A, you've got the giant spruce.
That's my next door neighbor.
Okay. Yeah, I love that nest. Love seeing nests in trees.
We know that the parents dominate in having the nest. And you'll frequently see the parents at the nest and you'll notice other ones circling, sometimes in that early April time slot, as if young ones have come back and are coming back to the nest, but they're being told that's really not where they're going to stay. Nice to see you, keep going. And so one of the things we're going to talk about is that the agreement the Osprey Project has with the town of Falmouth that relates to that, and so we'll come back to that shortly. I think at this point we're going to move on to why we saw a problem, and we've kind of touched on that at the very beginning, and I'll let Kevin do these couple slides and then I'll take over from there.
I will mention that once these juvenile birds fly south, we won't see them again until they're sexually mature. So that's generally 3 years. It's the same way with a lot of raptors. The snowy owls, they'll migrate down. Well, they get forced down as juveniles, and then they'll go back north once they're sexually mature. So here is a problem nest, as we'd call it. Our problem nests all primarily set up the exact same way. We have these two cross members on the top of a telephone pole, and then this one's got a lot of structure coming into it, so it's easy for these birds to kind of get their sticks to stay there. And once they get a single stick to stay, they think all of them are going to stick, and they're maniacal, so they will just keep building. Here's one with what Eversource calls a raptor guard. That's these PVC and duct tape things. So that's one form of deterrent that they use that we call them nest locks, because they lock everything together and make it easy for them to build. This one here, this was down in Woods Hole. This one's not really a problem for anybody because it's not a telephone pole. It's, I don't know exactly what it is. Some guy's satellite dish at his house. I have no idea. But that one doesn't bother us too much. They're not in danger. We're not in danger. It's all good. The other one's a big problem. Above transformers is a huge problem in this town now. Well, it was when we started this.
Right.
This is the Cappy's nest that we were talking about earlier. This is actually the second nest they tried to build behind Cappy's. They put a proper deterrent on the one in front, and then they moved to another pole, and then the rest. I basically said, hey, you're going to keep chasing them from pole to pole unless you do something. So they finally did. They put something similar to this up. And the birds moved to it within about 20 minutes of them putting it up. So this is the front of Cappy's again. This is what it looked like. That's what it looks like now. This bird is very angry. So one of the birds in this picture ended up getting electrocuted, which caused chaos. Now, if a male bird gets electrocuted, the female is then fought over by all the available males, including males that already have females. If the female dies, that nest probably won't exist anymore. So we don't like seeing females get electrocuted. And this is an improper deterrent. We don't really like these deterrents. We've discussed it with Eversource a little bit. They kind of agree that these need to be installed properly. This one, they installed it about 3 feet too high, so this bird just built right under it. And that's the goofy look they were giving the Eversource guys. They're like, what are you doing? Here are another couple locations that we don't mind osprey having nests. This one on the left here is in Walmart. You may have noticed that. There is a big problem with that nest, however. It's in a parking lot. And when these birds first fly, they're not real good at it. And most of the time they end up on the ground. And most of the time they find their way into a parking space, and then somebody pulls into park, doesn't see the bird. And that's what's happened to all of the chicks in this nest for the last 3 years. If we look on the right-hand side here, who notices something about that bird? Anybody have an idea? It is. There's a lot of white on it, isn't there? But it's really kind of more tan. This is an osprey talk, and we snuck a picture of a red-tailed hawk in there for you.
Yeah.
So these birds will utilize the osprey nests a lot over the winter.
And eagles are doing the same right now at
Yep.
Oyster Pond.
Down at Oyster Pond, yeah. That's going to be a fun one this year. The eagles have been going to that nest now in the late winter for the last 3 years. One of them wasn't quite sexually mature. This year, they're both sexually mature, so I think there may be a bigger battle than there was last year.
Okay, I'm taking it now.
Yep.
Okay, so does anyone, I have to take it away from him every so often. Does anyone recognize this chimney? It is the school. And this was 2 years ago right now at Easter time, and we had a problem with these osprey making sure that they could have their nest back. And the reason that that wasn't going to work is that as a town, we had voted to buy a new roof for this building. And as you heard Kevin explain, from the time there are eggs till the time that there are flying young osprey, that is considered hands-off, and we could not have let the roofers go up and fix that roof, replace that roof, had they laid eggs. So we were on a mission in April of this last 2 years ago to get them off of there. And it ended, and you can advance this, this is some of the things that were tried. The custodians went up there, they tried to put something up. You can see that didn't go so well. We're talking determination now, right? This is desperate times. And then, finally on Easter Sunday, this is how good your DPW is. They actually came out with me, they went up there, and after an actual standoff, eyeball to eyeball standoff, he put those up there, and you can see how furious they were. They sat up there pouting for so long. In the meantime, Kevin and I had put up a new platform with our volunteers, right looking at that same area in the parking lot, and it was sitting there ready for them. And it was a success story because they, in fact, accepted that new nesting site after some pouting. And I think for that first year, the male sat a lot of the time on one of the lights and just glowered. And you know, we got his message, but that's it, we won. So that was Kevin and Barb won, Osprey 0 on that one. Okay, so we have adopted this 4-pronged approach. This is how we started in those meetings. We realized that Kevin had a really good handle with his photography project on where we had problems. So we identified all the 25 plus poles that were a possible fire hazard, power outage, and death trap for the birds. The next thing we did was we worked to identify with Eversource what they would do to deter, because there is no point in putting up anything new unless you deter the old. They will always select the old first. The third thing was we identified with Conservation Commission in a lot of cases where we could put and have permission to put a new pole and platform. Sometimes it was in a tree, as you'll see. Sometimes it was on actual huge utility poles that we purchased and had a crane put in the ground. And sometimes it was in very delicate marshland where we had to literally not even saw and leave shavings in the marsh so that we were being very careful about the environment. And you will see all 3 of those. And then the last part, of course, was where a lot of you came in and you stepped up and helped us raise the funds so that, and we got a couple of grants, and we were able, had some people who actually sponsored a whole pole, and we were able to go forward in that first year and a half and solve most of the 25 problems. So here are some of our, this is really important. I don't want to leave Falmouth Together We Can out. You have in this town one of the best situations. We have this organization that operates as a 501c3. That means it's a charitable situation that creates an umbrella for a lot of little tiny organizations like us, like Joe Q Veterans, like the actual Veterans Memorial Group that put the library memorial up, and so on. They do the after prom. This group collects money, keeps track of it with incredible accounting, and writes checks when you need checks issued, like to buy 10 giant utility poles. So that's how that came to be. We also, as you can see, got a few wonderful grants, and Kevin's going to speak about one of those grants as we go forward. The next is to show you some of the pole types. This is the kind that we had in the marsh. We had these all, we'll show you how we built these. And do you want to talk a little bit about that one?
Sure, I'll take my mic back. You have your own mic already.
I do not.
You do, you have your own mic.
I did. Oh, my God.
All right, so the one up in the corner there, basically what we did, I'll go forward a couple of slides just to show you. We basically set up these kits with Miller Starbuck Construction. They offered to do all of the work on it and accept our lumber order to build. I believe this was 21 of them. So what we did is we came up with a design for the platform, got all the parts, arranged them into kits, and then had volunteers put them all together.
You were supposed to talk about that one.
Well, I'm going back to that one. Well, they had to understand that people volunteered to put these together. So LAMF stands for the Leanne Manillo Foundation. And that's a foundation that was formed. My buddy Rich Manillo's wife died shortly after childbirth to twins. And that was set up to help other people in their situation. If we look at Van and Nick's signatures there, that'll give you an idea that they were the ones that helped build this. So this is a very special one for me.
And there are a number of them that are signed with things on them.
Yeah, we encourage people to sign them when they built them. So everybody's got some sort of thing on it, which is pretty neat.
Where is this one
This one is at the Royal Megansett Nursing Home. The one on the bottom left here is right on the town line in Falmouth, the Mashpee Falmouth town line along Wacoit Bay. If you're that picture was actually taken from Mashpee, looking back towards Falmouth.
Okay, I guess I'm going to talk without a mic. At this point, this is the next one, please. Thank you. So we talked about the types of poles. This is to show you what it was like to have a tree company actually come out and trim this tree up so it was a dead tree, but one that wasn't going to come down in many, many years. It's a type of tree that will last standing for many years. We put this platform, so the platform was already created. Once the tree was trimmed up, this was positioned high up on that tree. That one is actually in Wacoit. And while we finished that one, the birds actually flew up and down the road in front of it, back and forth, and they were landed on that platform within an hour. This one shows you what it's like when you have a utility pole, and we have a number of those around town where we needed the height, and you've got to make sure you have these tall enough that the birds will feel safe and that they have the view that they want. This is one of the ones that went in on a single day. We had a crane hired, and that crane went around and dug holes. We had a hole dug, and then they lifted and dropped that in, and the platform was attached to the top of it. And we'll show you that in the works. Next one. You saw this. We had volunteers. This was a group of Boy Scouts, one troop, that got together and put a number of them together. This is what it looks like when you're not believing that in your lifetime you're taking delivery of 10 telephone poles. Luckily for us, again, because the town felt we were helping out with something that caused town-wide problems, they had allowed us to have those delivered to the DPW yard where we stored them till we were using them. The next one, this is to show you on a Saturday morning what it's like when we're hauling all this stuff, and that is Seafood Sam's trailer that he lent us, and we would load up for the day and take these out. That's just to give you an idea of how large. Somebody asked how big is a nest. We needed to make those that large.
And we made these all out of pressure-treated lumber so that they would last for a long time. There was a trend to use pallets on the top of poles. Those tend to degrade, which is, we'll talk a little bit about the problem that causes later. Next one.
Yeah, this one I think if you press, you should be able to have that. Yeah, press that. This will show you, we did a few installations, not with a crane, but with using this kind of equipment, and that was not as easy to do, believe me, as having a big truck with a crane.
If you notice to the right,
yeah,
that's the old pole they were on with the deterrent on
we're
it.
putting these.
And we had to do quite a bit of science to figure out where they wanted to be. And we figured out that they really would prefer an exit to the southwest of their nest and an entrance from the northeast. And that's due to our predominant wind here in Falmouth, blowing from the southwest.
Do you recognize where that is? That's right across from the old Edwards Boatyard.
Yep. So we put this nest in. The osprey moved to it. Later that summer, an osprey was observed eating a fish on top of a telephone pole right next to it. So Eversource came in and put another platform up on that pole, and the osprey now have 2 nests. So, yeah, and that one on 28 is a problem. Both of those chicks got hit by cars this year as well. So we're very conscious of where we put these nests, and we don't want them over roadways for the most part. There are some that there's nowhere else.
Can you play the next one too?
Yes, this is with a crane.
Yeah, this will show you the difference having a crane taking that and putting it in, but it's really dangerous at the bottom because you have to be able to get those into the hole and keep them down so they're not swinging around. And that is not lightweight, let me tell you.
For all of the smaller platforms, we did use volunteers. We did not ask for volunteers. We actually encouraged people not to show up
Yeah.
to the ones with the cranes. We didn't tell people exactly where we were or when we were doing them.
Okay, do you want to go? This will show you what we did as a group. Lenny was part of this too. We had incredible volunteer strength to lift these in environmentally sensitive areas, as you can see. And again, I want to commend Kevin's engineering on figuring out how we could use an extra piece of wood as leverage to get this up. This is a, 50-plus pound platform on top. Just so imagine what we're forcing upwards. And in a lot of cases, we're standing in marshland that we're sinking down into. It's not sturdy.
Yeah, you fell in a hole at this
It's
one
okay,
about
we
up to
didn't
your
have-
hip.
Yeah, I knew you'd tell that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was
Yes.
awesome.
The new pole you have, Gifford Street by the Methodist Church, it seems to be much higher than the others. What determines the height of these?
So that pole was put in by the people at the church in unison with Eversource. They justified it as we're putting up a light post, so we might as well put this platform on top.
Yeah.
Now, the height of these osprey nests is really determined by what's around them. They don't necessarily need to be on the tallest structure around. They don't mind being on a small structure as long as they can get in and out of it. Out at that church, there was no way for them to get in or out if they had put a smaller nest because of the trees that are around it, because of the height of the church. So there are a lot of variables that go into it. But the birds on the marshes will actually, there was a pair that nested in the marsh on the ground out by Minot Beach a couple of years ago. So they don't really necessarily need the height. Would they prefer it? Sure. I'd like to be in the penthouse too. But if it comes down to it, they will nest wherever. We use a 16-foot pole. We dig a 3 to 4 foot hole. So that puts us about 12 to 13 feet off the ground. And that seems to be a good happy medium, because if we put these things way up in the sky, they're real hard to get to. So we like to be able to do any repair work with one person with a ladder can go out and do it, rather than having to get a tree truck, having to get a crane. So we do kind of sacrifice a little bit of height, but we haven't seen that to be a problem.
And yes, we do have predator guards on them, because I know that was going to be a question, is what about animals climbing up? And yes, animals would climb up if they were not stopped by a predator guard. Okay, this map gives you, it's an early map. We have since determined that there are at least 150 nests in Falmouth, just in Falmouth. And this helped us identify where we needed to put a platform, where we needed to replace a deteriorating existing platform, and also it gave us an idea of how working with Eversource on where they needed to go put deterrents. So that's what we've been working with. We've added to that. We have some maps with us today. It gives an idea. We are ready to add a lot more that are known, and people keep reporting to us, especially ones that are what we call natural nests in trees, which are becoming more and more.
Yeah, we've got
noted.
3 of them right now over by Little Island that are nesting in trees. One of them's a problem.
Yeah.
So these are baby osprey. These ones they're old enough that they can kind of eat on their own. The mother doesn't have to strip their food for them at this age.
Notice the eye color,
Yep.
how orange.
And the white frayed edges to
Yep.
the feathers. This is the Lea Manillo nest over at Royal.
This one's at the Minot Yacht Club that we just did. This was a replacement, so we didn't do anything but replace the top of a very old, deteriorating one.
This
that
was an old pallet.
It was a pallet, exactly.
And just before this one, I just want to mention that one of our good friends, great member of the Osprey Project, he helped us out immensely. he lost his battle with depression, and we dedicated this nest to him. So that was David Remsen.
Yep,
He worked at Woods Hole. He was a wealth of knowledge.
he sure was.
He was a go-to for a lot of things.
So one of the things we noted, you saw that it said we had 70% success on our platforms the first year. Kevin and I did an analysis of what might be wrong, and we went out for year 2, and we added what we call starter kits. And our starter kits were their kind of sticks put up there, not in a nest, but enough to make it look like there was a nest there at one time, and maybe it would be attractive. And I have to tell you that that really worked. Really worked. We did add some screen to some of them, but we're really not needing to add screen anymore, we're noting. We just have to make sure the sticks are up there to start, so that they're not just having one drop through the holes. And you're asking, why do we have such space? We have space because these birds are constantly urinating in the nest, and you need to have that air circulating so that the whole thing doesn't just rot.
Yep. There's one on Woods Hole, I believe it's Nobska Road, right by the bathhouses, that's on a circular piece of plywood. We're going to have to deal with that one at some
Yeah,
point.
we are, because it's not breathing at all.
It's not, and it's outdoor plywood. That will not last long.
So again, we want to thank Mick Moriarty and Moriarty Trees. We have an unbelievable man who came forward with his tree company and helped us not only with the ones that needed tree trimming, but also going out and replacing. And this is a single person job. He is carrying 50-pound platform up. First, he's taking down what's old. He's actually saving as much of the nest as he can. He brings it down. We take it from him. We set it aside. He goes up with the new platform, puts it up there by himself with the help of a little bit of rope and helping make it balanced. And we're all telling him when it's exactly in the middle. It's not easy science. And then he comes down and he takes the old nest and puts it back up there. This is a huge task, and this man has been a godsend. I don't know what we would have done. We couldn't have done the last 2 years without him, really.
So Mick actually made a miraculous recovery from a fall out of a tree.
You all might have known that this was him.
He fell about 50 feet and landed in a seating position.
And within a month of getting the go-ahead to put weight on his leg again after a completely shattered pelvis, he was back out helping us do a job in Wacoit. But he's very passionate about this. See how he's carrying that piece of nest up? It's amazing. That's us getting that up to him. It's not easy. We all hold our breath.
There he is, putting all the
And
sticks
just
back
think,
in.
he has to just go like this and hope that he can get it and adjust it to where it's balanced and in the middle. Then he bolts that in place. Again, I'm going to compliment Kevin, the engineer, on figuring out the bolts, where the bolts go exactly, because if we didn't have that design, we have an unbelievable design for these, I have to say.
Yeah, those are attached with timber locks, so they're not going anywhere.
No.
You could literally park a Volkswagen on top of one of these.
Yeah.
We don't want to see that picture.
No. No.
Yeah, that's just handing them up pieces of stick. Now, in this case, we were just adding sticks that we found that were the same kind of sticks we thought they would gather. You have to think like an osprey on this project. And this is our latest that I told you about. When you're driving toward Mashpee, you know that there's a house on the left, on the riverside, that has an iron gate that went up not too long ago. And that is at the far Mashpee side of their property, right on Route 28. They had this beautiful locust tree that was not alive, but was going to stand there for many years. And they had contacted us a year and a half ago about having a problem with birds trying to build on their chimney. They had lost their natural nest, which had been in a tree behind the house, then adapted to thinking the chimney was the answer. Well, we now have this in place, and we're hopeful that since the owners put really good deterrents on the chimney, that this will now be their new home. And you'll all be able to see that as you drive on 28.
And you may have noticed a giant osprey nest on Barrows Road. If you were on 28, headed towards Mashpee, took a left on Barrows Road, look right up to your left, that's where the nest was. Those are the birds we're targeting. This is about 150 feet as the crow flies from that old nesting spot. And
Yep.
this is about 65 feet in the air, I think. Maybe a little bit less than that.
Yeah.
But we had to get this one, somebody asked about the height of it. This one, we needed to get this above the power lines or it wouldn't have worked. If we had dropped this below those power lines, they wouldn't have had their entrance from the northeast.
Yeah.
They would have gone somewhere else. This, we tried to make this look as inviting as possible. Out to the southwest of this nest, there is nothing, absolutely nothing.
And I'm just going to show you that. So first, all that was trimmed. If you saw how much we had to take off, right? But then if you look, Mick is so careful. Even though the ground was frozen, we carried these big pieces of plywood, and his truck would go a little bit. Then we'd all pick up all those plywoods and move them ahead. And that's how he went in and out of the property to make sure we didn't hurt the property. When we talk about figuring out where the new platform is going to go, we're not only dealing with just town land, we're dealing with private ownership land. We need to work with the homeowners. We're working with conservation, permitting all this. And everything we've done has been transparent and on the up and up, and with Concom's blessing when we've done it.
Yeah. We have nests on state property, we have nests on town property,
Yep.
we have nests on communal property, like an association
Yep.
lands, and we have it on private property
Yeah.
as well.
That's where a lot of the work comes in getting all this put together. It's not a simple, let's just go do this.
The majority of these end up within the area that is controlled by Concom. These birds like to be right on the water. I would love it if they'd like to be 2 miles inland, then we wouldn't have to deal with Concom very much.
But they've
they
been
don't.
very helpful. In all fairness, Concom stepped up and became an arm of this project,
Absolutely.
helping us get this done. And they see it as a fix for a big problem too.
Yeah, and Mark is such a bird person that
Yeah.
he understands the science. Especially, most of the science that we're using on this it's kind of observed science.
Right.
I wouldn't say that it's what experts would agree with necessarily. It's just what we've observed for our location. Southwest opening might not be good in Oklahoma. Who knows?
So that's just letting you know about that. That's just another bird nest that was within the osprey nest.
Generally, it's house sparrows that do that, so I wouldn't mind them knocking it off, but it's cute.
Is a permit needed for each nest?
For
If it's
each-
Concom.
Each nest.
If it's
Every
Concom.
single thing we put in a salt marsh
Yeah.
had to go through approval.
Yeah.
Let's see, there was one that we needed,
Like the one that we've got on Wacoit, no, right? That's on 28. The one that we put at the corner of Thomas B. Landers and 28, we have to have state permit. We have to have all kinds of police. You have all the rules when you're working at a highway like that.
had to be on a reflected
It was
pole.
crazy. Yeah.
It had to be a certain distance from the road
So
versus
we have to
the
learn
height.
all
It
this.
was-
Believe me, we were spending a year and a half learning how to get this done. There again, Eversource has been a key partner. We didn't start out as partners. It started out almost adversarial. We have come so far in 3 years that they now work with us. They understand that we are saving them from going out at 2 in the morning on these horrible power outage and fire calls. And they are working with us about deterrence. They're listening a lot better. And I would say this year, we're focusing on a few more deterrent areas, a removal of a platform on 28 because we want the birds to go back to that one across from Edwards Boatyard, not having the babies end up in the road. So we're working with them, and that's a good thing.
Yeah. And there's one on the left here, it's the left. That deterred pole in the background is the pole that they previously lived on. So that gives you an idea of how close we need to be,
Yeah.
which makes it very, very difficult to find a location. I mean, basically, if you look at a map and say, okay, there's an osprey nest here with a problem, what's around that. And we literally have to find something that's within about 300 to 400 yards.
But we've also had times when we found where it should go, but it is not safe in any way for us to put volunteers doing it. We've had a few times when we've had to walk away from a solution because we have to think about that all the time.
You had a question?
Yeah, when you've been installing these new platforms, have the ospreys that have been nearby interfered with the installation?
They fly by.
Yeah, we try to do this while they're not here. So most of the platforms that we put up,
This month.
we do everything
We
while they're
have
not
St.
here.
Patrick's Day as our drop dead, everything get done. And so we keep pushing Eversource to get their deterrents up, and we keep saying, what do we need to replace? What do we need to replace? What are we doing? So like we did that Wacoit one last month, and that works the best.
Yeah. And we also, I have Osprey platforms in my backyard as emergencies.
On the ready.
And that helped out a lot. Last year at the Wacoit estuary, they had a gust of wind that knocked their Osprey platform down.
The one that's on, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was 16 hours from
We
the
actually
time that
have
it
video
went
of it,
down.
of course, getting flipped right off of the pole. So, you know, that was, but we were out there, and again, Nick was available. It was a Sunday morning,
Yep.
and Kevin had a platform ready, and had that not been the case, we would have been in trouble.
Yep.
But we are trying really hard to keep platform ready, be ready to go.
Yeah, because we know that things are going to happen. These platforms are going to collapse. And as the ones that were put up around the 2000, 2005 start to really deteriorate, I think we're going to have quite a few of them that we're going to
I
have
think
to
we should
do.
do the next couple slides,
Okay.
and then we'll be done. So there it is again, showing you, we don't like that T situation. It's too high. It lets them build underneath. We like the half barrel, and you can see right there, they went to the answer. Once
And I don't
it
know
was
if you've
returned.
noticed, but this is the exact same location.
Yep.
This one on the left, this bird is sitting on what they call a dead pole. So it was a pole that it was cheaper for Eversource to just leave it standing than it was to move it when they moved the power lines. So we asked them kindly to put a platform up here, and they did, and they also put a proper deterrent on. And the combination of those two let these birds, those are the ones with the fishing pole.
And notice, the fishing pole is
Yeah,
there.
the zygodactyl feet aren't enough. They need the fishing pole.
Yeah, it was priceless.
Oh, I'm in charge of this, huh?
Yeah. And again, you've seen that picture, but angry osprey have very straight, tense legs. And boy, they can glower.
And again, this is the exact same location.
I honestly think the DPW guy that was up in the bucket having the stare down, he was actually very scared, intimidated, because those birds, when they look right at you, that is, and they've got those four talons. So.
And then we do have a lot of problems with these birds now because we did such a good job deterring them from, well, us and Eversource have deterred them from the poles, and we've given the ones that were living on the poles alternate locations. So now it's the newer birds coming back as 3 or 4 year olds, and they're building on chimneys now. So we're going to have a lot of problems with chimneys.
So that goes to what we were going to talk about. Our arrangement with the town is very clear. We do a 1-for-1 exchange. When we put up a platform, it's because we're replacing an existing nest and getting it deterred in that old area. We are not having people call us up and say, I would love to have one of these in my backyard. Can you come build one? Our idea is that we don't know what the saturation point is for a town our size with 72 miles of shoreline. We don't know. So we're not going to make that determination. We're not going to add. We're going to let the birds add on their own. We will be there to answer for problems. And I hope, so we've had to turn away some people who have asked us that they live on the water and could we come put one in. I just want you to understand that's how we look at this point. And I hope that if you've got other questions, I know some of you have to get going because it's noon. We really appreciate you being here. we hope you'll look at our t-shirts and our hats. The ones that have the little heart on them, those were a special edition of hat that we did to help Mick Moriarty when he was in the hospital and not able to work for many months. He actually was in a coma for 6 weeks, excuse me. So that's a special hat. That's why the heart's on there with the M. And I hope that anyone who has questions, you're welcome to stay.